Oh god, how could this have possibly gotten worse? Look, I'm not exaggerating here when I say that this month has been host to one of the most devastating pieces of Warhammer news that I've ever seen in all my years covering the wargame hobby. Because Games Workshop have just crushed Warhammer. They're on a goddamn killing spree right now. They're absolutely taking an axe to the best Warhammer game in existence of all time ever. And that's ironic because my previous video was all about how Games Workshop have been deleting Warhammer 40k models from their store at an unprecedented rate. But nothing could have prepared me for how far this has gone. So why? What the hell is going on? Well, okay, Games Workshop often update the rules for Warhammer, Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, and so on. These rule changes are often designed to increase hype with existing Warhammer players, but they're also designed to potentially give new players an excuse and an avenue to hop aboard the Warhammer hobby. And this is because from the outside, Warhammer is generally perceived as a hard thing to get into, and Games Workshop know that. Warhammer is the equivalent of hiring an escort that doesn't like you. Expensive, confusing, and overall intimidating for people new to the experience. Don't worry, you get used to it. And Games Workshop, as much as it may seem otherwise sometimes, do actually want people playing their Warhammer games, because no matter how much money they make on books or licensing the IP, ultimately the core of their business is selling extremely expensive plastic miniatures. They simply do not make any direct dollar bills from all those Grimaldis memes. More's the pity. Speaking of which, they also love new editions of their games because it is a way to justify a tax on existing players in the form of new rulebooks and new starter sets, and importantly, new miniatures. Boy, they love to make lots of new miniatures for new editions of their games, because new miniatures mean more potential miniatures to be bought by their customers, and that equals lots and lots of sales, especially when those new minis are hyped up by a new edition. But recently, Games Workshop have run into an existential problem. This whole Warhammer thing has kind of imploded because there's just not enough space to meet the desire of all the hungry executives to sell more and newer and different types of miniatures. Mostly Space Marines, admittedly. Games Workshop want more space for their Space Marines, but also like physical space to put the miniatures on a shelf or on their website to sell. So they need to secure more space for the future of their people. Whoa. Okay, this all got a little bit Imperium of Man. To combat this, Games Workshop have invested in another factory and warehousing. These are good ideas, they're long-term solutions to this problem, but they're still on the way, they're not here yet. So, in the meantime, Games Workshop still want to sell lots and lots of miniatures, and so they've found a way to make a whole lot more space, and it's gonna sound like the Imperium of Man again. But unfortunately, it has devastated Warhammer fans, especially of the best Warhammer game in existence. But of course, it's not the best war game around, because in my completely unbiased opinion, that would be Port Royal by Firelock Games. Today's video is sponsored by Firelock Games, creators of Port Royal. Port Royal is a brand new skirmish miniature war game where you'll get to build your very own scurvy crew to do battle for plunder in the ruins, jungles, and plantations of Jamaica on your kitchen table. And even when the fighting is over, the game doesn't stop, because between battles, you'll record the fate of your characters, potentially suffering injuries, discovering treasure, or even gaining experience and applying upgrades to your crew. If you have ever wanted to feel like a desperate pirate fighting for survival against dogged foes, commanding your very own scurvy crew and getting stronger with every battle, and God knows I've always wanted that, then this is the game for you. It features a fully comprehensive and supported solo mode. So if you've always wanted to try a miniature war game but don't have anyone to play with, then this is the perfect introduction to the hobby. You can also play cooperatively too if you don't fancy getting into scraps with your mates. And the game features a whole host of beautiful miniatures miniatures so that you can get the luscious Caribbean straight onto your tabletop with ease. If you're interested, then be sure to submit your pledge right now because the late pledges will be closing soon. So click the link below, time is running out. The core box pledge is only $79 and it comes with everything you need to get started with Port Royal. Or you could give in to your inner pirate and do the very, very tempting thing and plunder the legendary tier to get everything possible. Because you know in your black heart that that's what you want. So check it out now, and thanks to Firelock Games for sponsoring today's video. So okay, if you're like me and you've played pretty much every single war game in the Warhammer franchise or the Games Workshop sphere, then you know that the best Warhammer game is, ironically, the Lord of the Rings miniatures game. And that's just an objective fact. You cannot disagree with me because I'm cursed to only speak in truths or else burst into flame and be dragged into the fiery pits of hell ever since I was defeated by a demon in a riddle contest as a result of my opening of an ancient puzzle box that I purchased from a mysterious Asian man in an Egyptian restaurant in Marrakesh. And so I say Middle-earth strategy battle game is the best Games Workshop game of all time. Look at that, still flesh. And admittedly, I might be a little bit biased being a legit member of the Fellowship of the Ring and all. And if you don't believe me, here's an image of me outside a Hobbit orgy. Great night with the guys, that one. Have fun coming up with that image, Glenn. And truly, if you've never played it before, the Lord of the Rings miniatures game is a ton of fun. It's been organically chugging along in the background of the Warhammer ecosystem for over 20 years at this stage. In fact, for a while there, it was actually the biggest game the Games Workshop produced. And when Peter Jackson released all those Hobbit movies that only the true Hobbit heads can stomach, and the Lord of the Rings bubble burst as a result because it turns out there's not a lot of true Hobbit heads out there. It almost bankrupted Games Workshop, the company. Great times. And ever since, Games Workshop have been pretty wary of the Lord of the Rings game. They haven't given it a ton of support. But nevertheless, the game has survived and honestly thrived even without a lot of support and new additions from Games Workshop. Hell, my local community still has a big group that plays the game on the reg. But now, things have changed because Amazon, Warner Brothers, New Line Cinema, and probably many, many pornography studios are trying to turn Lord of the Rings back into a major cultural franchise IP. Please God, no, leave it alone. And so Games Workshop are now once again trying to take advantage of their legal right to produce little tiny miniatures of all our favorite Lord of the Rings characters like Alan? Albert? I don't know, it starts with an A. Costco Grima. I'm sure they probably haven't learned any lessons at the last time they tried this and almost went bankrupt, but, you know, God love them, they're trying. And we know that Games Workshop are trying particularly hard because they recently announced a brand new edition of the Lord of the Rings miniatures game, all amidst a salty spray of hype and, well, best not ask questions about what that white goo is. And people are excited. The new edition of the game is being released to coincide with the sexy new Lord of the Rings anime that features big titty anime girls, cool horsey fights, and giant eyes, because that's what Tolkien always wanted. Again, still flesh. And okay, personally, the anime thing doesn't do it for me, but I know there's people excited for it, and who am I to stand in their way? An attitude that I wish Games Workshop had taken themselves, because they have now decided that this new edition of Lord of the Rings must be inaugurated in blood. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that Games Workshop have now decided to delete a huge selection of the entire Lord of the Rings miniatures range, because they have. Last week, they made a post on Warhammer Community detailing how they are now removing entire Lord of the Rings factions, plural, from the game. And now if you go to their store, you'll see that things like Fallen Realms were just deleted, the entire Dunland section of Isengard were wiped off the map and aren't coming back. Sorry, got bad news there. Major factions like Mordor have lost huge swathes of their range, including one of my favorite, most iconic models in the entire model range for Lord of the Rings, the Ringwraith of Angmar, which looks like it has leapt out of an old Lord of the Rings illustration and into my eyeballs. They even came for my boy Grima Wormtongue. Grima! Because nothing is secret to these monsters. But not only that, dwarves, elven kingdoms, Misty Mountains, Gondor, Mirkwood, Dol Guldur, and more. They have all been hit significantly by this cull, by this deletion. This is one of the biggest range culls I've ever seen in the history of Warhammer, and there's been a lot of them lately. Now, most of these miniatures will be permanently discontinued, removed from sale, and no longer available in the next edition of Lord of the Rings to buy before or play with. And sure, some of these will come with legacy rules, but honestly, these will never see play again. Just like no one plays with Colonel Schiffer and the Last Chancers in 40k anymore. It's just the reality of war games. People generally play with relevant models. It doesn't matter if you still make vroom vroom noises with your Doom Rider while alone in your bed at night. You're not going to get it onto a table. So this is a massive loss to the game. Most everybody has lost rules and use of some of their models in the game, but some people were just devastated. Their entire collection wiped out with a single click. So there's a lot of upset right now, a lot of wailing of teeth in the community, a lot of anger. And honestly, yeah, there should be. Games Workshop miniatures are incredibly expensive, especially Lord of the Rings minis, which can weirdly be one of the most expensive ranges because a lot of the game still relies on metal and resin materials, which Games Workshop like to use as an excuse to jack the price up of the figures significantly. But not only now does it feel like there's a lot of wasted money on the table, it takes a lot of time and effort to build and paint these models too. It's frustrating to invest a lot of your life into models, building them, painting them, playing with them, only to discover that they've now been discarded by the game and community. And that if you want to play the new edition, then you're going to have to do that all over again with something different. Maybe even worst of all, not everybody knows that this has happened because Games Workshop have kept this news pretty close to their chest. When you click on the all news and features in Warhammer community, this article doesn't even show up. Instead, you have to actively look for it by directly searching in the search bar. Or in my case, click into an article on a new model reveal for the new edition, then scroll down to the more news section and see an article entitled Range Update Explained, and then click it curiously, a range update, how strange, and then have your face grow pale with horror as you realize that now, not only do you have to put your Grandma Wormtongue on a horse model into a blender, but all your hopes and dreams too. Buzz buzz! But you know, it's just a little range update. Never mind that Games Workshop have just wiped out more of Middle Earth than all the armies of Morgoth put together. So yeah, this really blows. A lot of beautiful miniatures gone, especially for Fallen Kingdoms and the Dun Landings. They shocked me, especially because many of the models there are new and extremely beautiful too. But they're not alone because Games Workshop are even ending, shockingly, the extremely new Lord of the Rings starter set that literally just came out last year. It came out literally last year and now it's gone. It's gone. That's a crazy turnaround. I think the Battle of Osgiliath lasted longer than the starter set depicting it. This is frustrating, but I think there's a lesson here for both Games Workshop and for the broader wargame community. For Games Workshop, they need to be more open about their plans in future. They need to give way more heads up for this because now the store is empty of all these models. You can't pick them up anymore. And look, I get it. I don't think that every single model range should or could be around forever. I get that they're going to change. Model ranges are going to go away, come back, etc. But how Games Workshop are doing it right now is too sudden, sharp, and short notice. They need to be more transparent and open with the community. Talk about their plans. Talk about the future pipeline of their games. Because these swift removals without warning, they hurt the credibility of their miniature ranges with players. I mean, how many people will feel comfortable buying into future factions now when everyone knows at the back of their mind that these minis could be taken out of production and deleted at any moment? If you're not buying Isengard, Mordor, Rohan, or Gondor, will your chosen faction be around next year? And if you buy into some of the weirder factions like Angmar or Farharad, how long do they have? And even if you do stick with the main factions, who's to say you still won't lose access to whole swathes of your miniature collection anyway? I mean, that's a killer for a time, money, and passion dependent hobby like wargaming. But for the wargame community and Games Workshop too, honestly, I think we should all just be getting more comfortable with 3D printing and understanding especially that if you're invested in the Games Workshop ecosystem and miniatures, you need to prepare for the idea that Games Workshop will simply decide someday to render your entire collection invalid and there's nothing that you can do about it. Nothing is secret anymore. And so we need to just broadly accept third-party prints, 3D printed miniatures, both in casual play, but also competitive and tournament events too. And luckily, I think that the Lord of the Rings community are one of the better communities for that. So there's a little bit of a silver lining here. You know, hey, the nukes are coming, but we had bunkers. And for Games Workshop, if they are the best miniature designers in the world, as they claim so often, and their biggest fans claim that they are, then they should feel comfortable proving that in the open market, competing with other sculptors. Long term, it's healthier for their games, like how most historical companies still produce their own miniatures, but their games are often miniature agnostic. They accept other companies' miniatures in their tournaments and things, and this has led to a cheaper, healthier genre of war game. I mean, check out the prices of this versus that. Also, you know, maybe Games Workshop should stop making such massive cuts to model ranges when a new edition of a game comes out, though. It's starting to get me real nervous when I hear that a new edition of a game that I love is coming out. I have a very big Warhammer collection, and I don't want to see it all go the way of the Dolicaris. Cute though it is. Now, unfortunately, this might not be the end of this story. I'm concerned that we're actually going to see even more cuts soon, so I'm going to continue to follow it. And if you want to support me on this channel, especially in a world where YouTube ads are paying less than ever, and myself and other creators are increasingly being demonetized, then support me on Patreon. You'll get access to ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and more, and help me keep this show running. Thanks so much to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye. Who cares? Star Wars is better than Lord of the Rings anyway.